core values to valued culture. Here is your host, Will Scott, interviewing another CEO about leading culture in their company.
Hey everyone, John Corcoran here for Will Scott, and the reason that I'm talking to you is because in this interview, I actually interview Will, and I did this interview for my podcast, a separate podcast, but we thought it was so valuable that we thought it would be great to share with all of you. So in this interview, I go into depth in Will's background and why he's so passionate about culture and how he learned about culture in his two software companies, one of which is 20 years old. So I think you're going to really find value in it. So that's why I'm doing all the questioning in this particular episode, but I think you'll really enjoy getting to know a bit more about Will. So here it is. Here is Will Scott. All right, welcome everyone. My guest on this show is Will Scott. He is a culture expert. He's a podcast host, speaker, and author of The Culture Fix, From Core Values to Valued Culture Using 9 Deeds in 90 Days. And we're going to be diving into that and how you can improve the culture of any company you work in. As I mentioned, my guest is Will Scott. He's the host of the Culture Czars podcast, which I hear is just amazing. I hear it's just absolutely amazing. So joking a little bit. It's a great show. You got to go check it out. Be sure to subscribe. You're also a facilitator and trainer through EO. You're an EOS implementer. You're the author, of course, of The Culture Fix. But take me back. You were CEO of Ware Systems, which you still continue to own, a company that has software in the supply chain niche, and you've grown up that business. It's on every continent. You were saying beforehand that you're adding new warehouses that are part of the system. Is that where you first started to think deeply about the idea of culture and its impact on the business's bottom line?
Well, yeah, it's funny you should say that because Ware Systems is actually 20 years old this year. And in 1999, it took me about a year. So I think it was in 2000 that I wrote my first set of core values for my company. And kind of core values, I believe, is the sort of the first piece of material that you generate or the first concepts that you come up with for having a great culture. Yeah, so that it began at Ware Systems 20 years ago.
But that's not enough, right? It's not as simple as, okay, we've written them out, stick them in a drawer, and we're done, right?
Yeah, I think that's the first two or three deeds of the 9 deeds. So no, that's absolutely not enough. And that's one of the things I often say is, core values can't just be words on the wall or, a poster in your cube. They really do have to be brought alive, made to thrive in the organization, and then used to drive performance in the organization.
Right.
So no, it's not enough. But yeah, you were mentioning Ware Systems. We're thrilled to be in our 20th year, and we pivoted to being a NetSuite partner about 6 years ago, and that's been really good for our business. And now, so if anybody's in the NetSuite business and they want an awesome supply chain management and warehouse management system, then Ware Systems is just seamlessly integrates with NetSuite and just a full functioning, really great value play. And it's a SaaS, of course, like NetSuite. And yeah, we open a new client somewhere in the world about every 2 weeks. So it's pretty exciting times for us there. Yeah.
What was it like in the early days of building up that company, and what did you do early on to set the right culture?
Well, one of the challenges that we had is that we were very disparate. We were actually all over the world. I had, even though as a small team from day one, I had folks in Europe, in the States, and in Africa, in Asia. And so it was really important to build a cohesive culture, given how remote we were and how little we actually physically were in the same space together. And so we just decided to make an investment in that. And so I'm still talking about some of the same things today in terms of what is best practice for having a great culture. It's things like making sure the language is unique, and it feels special to you, and that you use that language and use those values every day and every week in your work, in your meetings, that you are catching people committing core values and rewarding them for that, and that you are, of course, hiring and unhiring around them, and finally, measuring and going for that ROC, as I call it, that return on culture. So making sure that the return you're getting is well in advance, exceeds the investment that you're making in it.
And what were some of the core values that you decided on early with the business, and how did you come up with them? Was it just you deciding these are the core values? Did you involve other people?
No, for sure, we involved the team, and we didn't try this until we'd been running the company for at least a year. So we had some folks, and we kind of had some operational, references really for our values, and we had some stories about how we had delivered to clients that could become folklore as part of our values. So no, we did it as a team, and I remember, today I actually go for less hackneyed words because we did have things like integrity and respect, but today I think that's sort of table stakes, and I like people to have more creative values. But yeah, we had integrity and respect, and we had 3 bullets, 3 behaviors underneath each value to describe what they meant. Another one was technical excellence. We were in the software delivery business, and so technical excellence was an important one. But we had some detail that described what we meant by that. There were 5 of them. We put them all on a little card, and that little card was something you could carry around in your wallet, or have in the desk whenever you're in a client meeting, so they knew what values you stood for. Something that we could put at someone's desk. Yeah.
So I've heard some people say, maybe putting up posters or doing something creative like that. You believe in those sorts of things? A good way
Absolutely.
to do it.
In fact, one of the differentiators about the Cultures Ours delivery compared to other people in the spaces, we're not just about the words. We're big believers, and there's lots of research to show that people will remember 65% more likely to remember the values if they're associated with other arts, particularly imagery, graphics. I even like to see, music applied to the core values and used to fire up a company meeting, or a monthly town hall.
So give us an example of that. Like the CEO comes in singing like a little tune or something with the core values as part of it.
One good example is Sabre, and the CEO there is David Nance. And Sabre are in the pepper spray business. They're actually the largest pepper spray company in the world. And their tagline for many years, the company's also been around since 1975, and the tagline for many years, created by David Nance, the CEO, has been "Making Grown Men Cry" since 1975. So of course, the Rolling Stones song "Start Me Up" has lines in there about making grown men cry.
Right.
And so it's awesome. Whenever they have their town hall happening, and David gets a soapbox to sort of stand in the middle of the factory floor, and one of the things he always does at that meeting, by the way, is lift people up for who were caught committing the core values. But the way they announce the meeting is with "Start Me Up" by the Rolling Stones.
That's great.
Making grown men cry.
That's great. That's great. So how do you go about functionally? How do companies go about rewarding employees for fulfilling on these core values?
In the case of Sabre, who we were just talking about, they actually give a monetary award every month to every department. So every department might have 10 nominations, but they pick one, and that person gets the award that month. And it's $250. It's a pretty nice. It's a pretty nice award. Mm-hmm. Other companies stay away from the financial incentive and just make it something cuter, like Mike Petsalis and his company Vercom in Canada. They're in the internet security space, and they reward their employees. So their core values actually are associated with the characters from the TV series Star Trek. So they have Scotty and Spock, and Scotty represents, for example, getting stuff done. So they have little statues, and every month they award the statues, and somebody's lucky enough to get to keep the statues on their desk, and it's a thing of pride for them. And if the CEO forgets that, by the way, at the town hall, all the employees say, "Hey, where's my Scotty? Where's the statuettes?" You know. So it can be simple, little inexpensive stuff like that that is very quickly becomes significant for the corporation.
Right, right. What about hiring? How do companies ensure that they hire someone who's going to be consistent with their core values?
Yeah, I love this one because people say to me all the time, "Oh, yeah, we hire for cultural fit. We always hire people to fit." And then I say, "How do you do that?" Yeah, gut feel. It's kind of what comes out, you know. So yeah, but there are ways to hire for your values, and a great way is your core values should have some stories that represent them, or some stories that make those values come clear. And when you hire new people, then you can do that, and you hire people that you're using that story as the benchmark, basically. And you ask a culture czar, as I say, to do these interviews every time, and they just get really good then at using a series of questions that sort of flush out the behaviors of the candidate and to make the best attempt at making a match with, as you said, John, fit with core values.
So questions like, what would you do in this type of scenario types of questions?
So start with open-ended questions. Yes. Just start actually with, hey, what are your values? And then start drilling down into those. And before you even say what our values are, you then say, so yes, it's a scenario. What would you do if? And you're in this scenario, and it's a real scenario that your company's experienced, and you've got one right answer. The one right answer is what your culture czar did, and then you measure their response against how close it was to that ideal answer. Yeah.
Right. What about, so we've been talking primarily about advertising these values internally to your existing team, but what about advertising them externally so that you attract the right people to the team? Is that a different approach? How much should companies be, advertising their core values, especially if maybe sometimes they're a little quirky? Like you mentioned the little Scotty dolls, like I imagine some companies sometimes are a little self-conscious. We don't want our clients to see that we're giving out these little Scotty dolls. They're going to think we're not serious, that sort of thing. What are your advice? Yeah. What's your advice to companies on that?
Once companies have identified a great culture and it's very personal to them and they love it, then those kind of embarrassments go away and you just embrace it so strongly that you're very happy that people know how you represent your culture and how important it is to you. But yeah, I always encourage CEOs to not just think of themselves as leading a company, John, but leading a culture, which goes beyond the four walls of the company and is upstream to your suppliers and vendors and downstream to your customers. Put them on your website. And once they're very public, of course, to your first question about how do you recruit, you got to be a bit more canny with your questions, because probably your candidates are coming in knowing what your core values are, and you don't want them to be able to play smoke and mirrors with you. So you got to be more canny on that. But no, it's definitely best practice to have them not only on the walls internally, but on the website and shared with your customers and your vendors. Because if your whole supply chain is basically operating to values that work for you, they are going to be just, your whole life is easier. Your doing business just goes much smoother.
Right. And now one of the harder decisions for companies is when they have a client, maybe a big piece of business that is not in alignment with their core values, and maybe they need to decide whether they want that business or not. So how do you advise companies to make those decisions when money's on the line?
Well, I know it's not always easy, and I don't pretend it's easy, but if the company can economically weather a transition where they do basically cease working with that customer and find customers who are a better fit and therefore great to work with, I definitely recommend them doing it. And the sooner the better. A difficult client that's not fitting the culture just is a big drag on the company. They're usually, hard in lots of ways, very demanding. They want to pay the lowest prices. They are late payers, and they treat your customers badly, your employees badly, And when you unhire a client like that, just the whole health of the organization just kicks up. And so, do it, and do it as soon as you can. But I don't pretend it's always easy. Some of those clients are the whale, and they might represent 30 or 40% of your business.
Yeah. I imagine you've had some clients where the boss thinks the culture is great and the story on the ground is a little bit different. How does the boss know whether they have a good culture or not?
Well, one of the things that I recommend there is, of course, checking in with the culture and doing it anonymously. When I start working with a new client, John, I always begin with a company-wide survey to all employees, and it's 20 questions.
Doesn't lie.
It's free on my website. Folks can go, borrow that, and that's just one data point. But it's a very significant one. You tend to find out very quickly just whether there is a match between what the C-suite thinks and the factory floor thinks, or the other employees in the company. And then from that, go into interviews, and you'll learn a lot more in interviews too. I like to interview at least some number of the employees, depending on how big the company is. And you can very quickly generate a very effective data-backed report for the C-suite about just whether their culture is as good as they think it is, and is it synchronous with what they say it is.
Right. Now, we've talked mostly about positive culture, but the flip side of that coin is negative culture and the consequences of a company that doesn't have its core values in place, doesn't maintain its culture, doesn't actually put in the work in order to maintain it. One of your subchapters in the book is titled "When Your Culture Train Goes Off Track." So tell us a little bit about, maybe some examples of the dire consequences, some kind of nightmare scenarios.
Yeah, well, John, I've mentioned this one on other podcasts, but I'm going to use it again because it's a public one that's quite well known now, and so everyone can relate to it. But a good one is the Wells Fargo. They had recently had the largest fine of all time, $1 billion fine from the FDIC for malpractices that they were doing. And you know what they were doing, John? They were things like opening credit cards, opening accounts, hundreds of them, thousands of them, in their customers' names without their customers knowing or wanting those things. And this is all driven by internal policies around incentivizing the salespeople, to open more accounts, right?
Yeah.
What do you think their core values said? Their core values said, we will only push products to our customers if they need them. And we will only do things that are benefit and that are right for the client, for the customer.
So they had it in writing, but they just weren't living them.
They had it in writing, yeah. And the same CEO that wrote those presided over the malpractices. So just a really good, stark example of where you have values, but you're really not paying. You're not even paying lip service to them. You're actually stomping all over your own values.
Yeah.
Because you're pursuing something and your values clearly are not what they say they are. So, and that is very common. There are lots of examples that makes employees very cynical. And of course, does it pay? No, it doesn't pay. In the end, you are found out, just like Wells Fargo were. Right. And if you don't have a big fine, you have certainly some very disgruntled employees who, are not doing their best for you.
Right.
So the flip side of a great culture is, it's 180 degrees.
Right, absolutely. We're running low on time, but any other advice for companies that are looking to improve on their culture, other than, of course, getting the book, Culture Fix, but what else can they do?
One of the one of the favorite things that I talk about having a great culture, and it is in the book, is the why. A lot of companies, even if they have core values and have a great culture, still haven't put into words what their why is. And if they can, that can be so significant for the employees. Everyone wants to feel like they're doing something meaningful in the world. Mm-hmm. So yes, a great culture means they can walk into work and they can love where they work and who they work with. But if they can leave at the end of the day believing they've done something worthwhile for the world, then that's so much the better. And will be so much more productive. And that comes from answering the question, what's the why, or determining the core purpose for the business. And the book also goes into how to do that. I think I have a very unique way of doing that I haven't seen anybody else do, and it works in any company as a way of determining what your why is in your company.
And they can learn about that on your website, I assume, cultureczars.com?
That's it's definitely in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And it's touched on the website, but I don't go into a lot of detail on the website as to how it's done. Whereas there are some few steps to the process, which is in the book. Yeah.
Good.
And the book is available on Amazon.com. It's available on Kindle for just $2.99.
Excellent. And I was going to say that. So the Culture Fix, from core values to valued culture using 9 Deeds is the name of the book. So you have to get that on Amazon. Yeah. But before we wrap things up, the last question I'm going to ask you is, let's pretend that we're an awards banquet, much like the Oscars, the Emmys, and you, Will, are receiving an award for lifetime achievement for everything you've done up until this point. And tell me, who are the relationships that have been so instrumental to your success in your career so far? I'm going to guess that being the culture czar yourself, you got to mention everyone, right? Because you can't leave anyone out, right? Or else that's going to create the wrong culture. But there's got to be some people in particular.
There are definitely some standouts for me. I mean, yes, of course, I've learned a lot from a lot of great people in the world, and I couldn't possibly mention them all. But the first name I got to mention is Hugh Scott, my father. I mean, he was a values-driven man, and both at work and within the family. And I definitely learned a lot from him. I've worked with some great folks too, my business partners in Ware Systems, which includes my brother Rod Scott, and also at Lextech, the mobile app development company. The team I'm working with now at Culture Czars, learn from them every day. They've gone through all this process with me, and that's been really great too. And I'll give a shout out to a couple of well-known folks that you also know, people like Vern Harnish. He writes about core values in his book, The Rockefeller Habits. Gino Wickman also believes that having a well-defined, a healthy culture is very important. Patrick Lencioni does too. So I'm not the first author to write about it, but I think there's some unique pieces in my program, and particularly what's unique is that the visual side. I believe in making these things visual and having them on displayed and powered by the arts.
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea. The Culture Fix, from core values to valued culture, using 9 Deeds in 90 days. You can check it out on Amazon, cultureczars.com. Will, thanks so much.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web at cultureczars.com, and we'll see you next time.